Hey, everybody. Welcome to Golden Breakthrough. I'm your host, Hunter Harris. And with me today is Frank Dale. He's a product and operations specialist. He's the co-founder of Costello, which was acquired by SalesLoft. That's part of how we know each other. And also the co-founder of Tempo, which is in the works now. Frank, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Hunter. I'm excited to be here. We worked together, obviously, at SalesLoft, and then
Incredible.
I left to go start a new company, and we are serving professional services firms with this company. So our role is to help them deliver more with the team that they've already got, because in professional services, everyone knows AI is changing the economics of delivery, including their customers. And so they're asking the services firms to do more with the resources that they are procuring. And so our job is to streamline everything from onboarding the customer to delivering the project, spotting the risks, and ensuring that things are done to a very, very high standard. So very excited about that.
It's a very cool looking product from what I've seen online. But jumping into it, the first thing that I wanted to cover with you, what we talked about on our prep call previously, is you've created your own AI chief of staff, right? So, first of all, can you run me through what that is and what it does?
I will too. And I'll also tell you how we started to extend that to the rest of our company, which has been awesome.
Ooh, very interesting.
Yeah. So what I started with was just building on top of Claude Code, which is what I think a lot of people do when they begin. And this was a little bit ahead of OpenClaw really taking off, and I borrowed a lot of concepts from that. But effectively, so I call it Athena. Athena's job is to serve as my personal chief of staff. So Athena has everything from access to my calendar and my inbox, access to now a shared knowledge repository that we run out of Obsidian for our entire company. So think having something very similar to having like the GitHub repo that we have for code. It's a repo that we keep that has everything from our PRDs, how we operate, company values, decisions we've made, meeting notes, you name it. So Athena's got access to all of those things, plus even like my personal personality profiling. So it could watch for strengths and weaknesses that might come from that. And its job is to help me plan and execute throughout the week. It picks up tasks that I hand off. It even does stuff like help me remember to schedule like date nights with my wife or activities with my son. It keeps track of like what he's liked and not liked, so that I'm investing in that relationship along with the things that I do at work.
Very, very cool. So, how did you get started with this? Like, what was like I know you mentioned Claude Code, but you had to start somewhere. What was like the initial targeted use case that you were attacking that kind of led to this whole expansion?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this, it's a product I've wanted to build for years.
Hmm.
And when there was kind of a fast path to start on top of Claude Code, that's the route that I took. And what initially attracted me to it was really just the planning use case. And what I was looking for was something to help me run my quarterly, monthly, and weekly planning routine,
Hmm.
and then dailies, and then keep track of not just what have I done and versus what I planned, but also kind of my thought process along the way. And AI is really great at that, kind of like watching for how do we make decisions along the way, logging it, and then going back and doing some first pass analysis. So I started there, and then it quickly expanded out to a number of other use cases. So there's like date night planning with my wife, making sure that I'm rotating through activities with my son, reminding me to keep up with friends that I don't see as frequently. From a professional standpoint, it fetches via MCP every day at the end of the day, transcripts from any internal or external meetings, anything that's not already logged to our product as an action item that I owe, it flags and catches, it keeps the backlog, and it just makes sure that I'm on top of everything.
So, in terms of memory systems for this as well, did you start off just with like flat files for everything, or were you immediately like hooking it into Obsidian MCPs? Like, what was the progression there?
Yeah, so I started with flat files. So in the beginning, it was just Markdown inside of a GitHub repo.
Hmm.
Then I progressed to adding Obsidian as essentially local file storage, although I cloud sync that as well in case I want to take Athena across different machines. And then what it's really evolved into over time is really two things. So I've got a multi-layer memory system that covers everything from high role, what's the role for this project, who am I? What are the things that I care about? Who are the key people in my life, both personally and professionally? And then at different levels of hierarchy, there's memory for each thing that I'm doing. So, like, what am I personally working on? What are my personal goals? What are my professional goals? What are the goals with the team and the company? How are those tracking? So we started there. As the product has grown over time, I added a vector database to that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like QMD. That's an open source project. I think the CEO of maybe Shopify actually built that. So I implemented that locally, and that's helped
Hmm.
tremendously as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that the vector database was a big like value add in terms of like context management and making sure the appropriate memories are being found and injected. For using, I think you said it was QCP. Does that also function as a essentially index for the Obsidian stuff, or is it just
It does.
well, basically like you have your Obsidian stuff over here, and you have your like vector database related stuff over here, and I imagine still some of the flat files and whatnot for working memory and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So QMD, I use it both as so it indexes both the Obsidian Vault as well as other files I give it access to on my
Cool.
machine locally, which is awesome. And the big add there, I would say, is really the way we would search through files prior to that was primarily grep, and that's
Yeah.
pretty good. But you're going to miss some things that are semantically important that like a vector approach is just going to pick up on.
Hmm.
So moving to that was a significant win because as that vault has grown and the way I built that vault, there were obviously files I was creating along the way. But at the beginning of moving things into Obsidian, I had notes that were like in Roam Research, if you remember that product. I had notes that were in Evernote. I had some other things that were like in a Google Drive. I immediately moved all of that stuff into that Obsidian vault that I use
Hmm.
this project, at least on the personal side. We have a team Obsidian vault, which is separate, and it has access to that as well. And then I've got QMD running to basically help kind of index everything.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Have you like explored outside of just a raw vector database, like actual building out actual database schemas or anything like that? Like essentially building a relational database of your data, or is that like a future thing? I also wanted to mention for the viewership too, you mentioned grep versus vector DBs. One of the other important lifts in terms of vectorization too is when you're grepping one that ends up being very token intensive, which is becoming more and more of a concern these days. And then with the addition of tokens, it also dilutes attention, which means that your model is more likely to lose track of what you're working on or hallucinate or hit your compactual window early, which means that, it gets a lobotomy and then you have to kind of start rebuilding some of the context all over again, which is, let me tell you, when I hit that context window, like mid flight on work that I'm doing, it is a agonizing pain. Like so much of my effort is trying to like find different ways to like do manually handle compaction and pass that data around so that I don't lose everything in its like brutal summarization.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that I'm sure you're probably seeing this. So much of working with AI today is memory management.
It
And
really
there's
is.
like intra-session memory management, which is what we're talking right now about with compaction. And then there is like across the week. So, I
Hmm.
had to invent an approach for memory for items that were happening throughout the week. Because if I did not do that, what would happen is each time I initiate some kind of action or chat with Athena, it was like starting all over, and it will get
Hmm.
pretty annoying as a user to do that. And then you have kind of like long term storage. Some of those concepts you can borrow from Claude Code, but there's some other awesome projects out there. So I borrowed the dreaming concept from
Hmm.
OpenClaw. I've started to look at like Hermes agent as another agent for concepts like that. And what's been awesome personally is many of the concepts that I will experiment with in this product actually inform some of the things that we do for our customers. Because I think for the segment that
Right.
we're building for, they're not like URI where they're going to be deeply comfortable with doing things that are technical. And so you need to build things that are accessible. So the average person is not going to want to build dreaming, but they very much know that they want the products that they work with to understand them and to know here are the things that I care about. Here's what gets me excited. Here are my ways of working and capture that so that they're not having to kind of re-guide the product every single time.
Absolutely. Like I think we're in a really interesting moment right now where we're seeing this explosion of tools to a certain extent. We're seeing this explosion of like memory management systems. Like to your point, there's dreaming, there's what Hermes uses, there's the G Brain, there was that Milojovic one from I think that was like a month ago now.
That's right.
I think that was Memory Palace, all of which are really interesting because they're taking a very human approach to memory management. And I guess like on a philosophical level, like I definitely think that there are interesting lessons to be learned there, but also at the same time, these tools are not humans, and over indexing on these metaphors is I think we're gonna like adopt some of the metaphors and then like shake them a bunch and then end up with something radically different on the other side. I wanted to ask because I am familiar with a lot of these memory management solutions. You mentioned Hermes. What have you been taking for Hermes since I'm less familiar?
Yeah, it's been newer. It's been a newer add to my project. There've been a couple of things that I've really liked. One, if I were to compare it to OpenClaw, I feel like Hermes at this point is it's maybe a little less proactive, and sometimes that's very much what you want. You can get in trouble fast with
Strongly
OpenClaw.
agree. Like OpenClaw is so proactive that I just haven't adopted it. Like I'm very interested in a lot of the approach of OpenClaw. I just don't want a tool that's that proactive, right? I want it to be a little bit more hesitant. I want it to selectively go out into the wilderness and do stuff for things like research. But if it's going to take destructive actions, I really want it to be more conservative with that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the piece where I've noticed that there seems to be like a distinction between those two products that actually matters to me. I mean, I think this is totally solvable. Is that if you look at if you go to the OpenClaw repo and you look at just some of the default operating instructions that are there, in many ways, it's really a great guide on how to build an agent. And the
Yeah.
guidance pretty terse, right? I mean, it's
Hmm.
only a handful of sentences. You get some highly agentic behavior. The piece that I think gets missed, especially with some of the ways that OpenClaw may want to truncate things to stay within memory limits, is that it will not look necessarily at like semantic relevance of certain words. So it'll truncate stuff down and then suddenly you'll get some behavior that isn't quite what you thought. And it's doing it in theory to preserve memory space, but it's getting rid of words that matter a lot. And I found that for whatever reason, Hermes, if you look at their approach, is a little better at the moment at looking at kind of semantic
Hmm.
relevance of some of the words before it does the truncation.
That's pretty interesting. Is Hermes also patched into cron? Because the whole approach of using cron for persistence is one of the factors in OpenClaw where I was like, "Ooh, I'm not super sure about that." Because that is kind of it's like the core thing, in my opinion, that both makes OpenClaw exciting and makes OpenClaw dangerous too, right? Because if you don't have the cron piece, you'll run and you'll follow a particular thread, reach a stopping point, end. With cron, it's just a drumbeat of like, hey, go do this action. Hey, go do this action. Hey, go do this action. I think it's every minute by default or something like that. Maybe every 2 minutes or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So, like, I would love to adopt. Well, and I guess the tools that I'm building and agents that I'm building are not taking that cron based approach.
Yeah, I've noticed that like you can get in trouble really fast with OpenClaw for that reason, but it is configurable. And I think that the challenge is most of the people getting in trouble are not configuring. And
Yeah.
you can guide the project to configure different types of things to run on different schedules, which I think is a really important thing to do because, certain things like you don't generally need OpenClaw to go check your email 10 times in the middle of the night, when it can effectively summarize for you, at 7 a.m. whenever you're going to log in or 8 a.m. or whenever you start your day. And it's not that important. Conversely, there could be some other things like if it's watching, I don't know why you would ever want to let it watch for fraud on your bank account, but if it was watching for those kinds of notifications, you might want to be notified in the middle of the night and that could be okay.
Yeah, I would say as like a very different tool, Claude Cowork has the ability to like build out certain skills and tasks and jobs and execute them on particular like schedules effectively. Like let's say every day at 7 a.m. I guess that is effectively the same as using a very loosely configured cron. But that's sort of like I guess at least for the rhythms that I'm using for the most part, I'm really interested in pulling data on like daily bases and whatnot less so a like minute to minute or hour to hour. Like in general, it's like we've accumulated a certain set of data over the day. Let's go through, do some analysis, summarize, write some files, these sorts of activities overall.
Yeah, 100%. I'm totally with you on that. And it is interesting, though. I would argue that Anthropic is releasing more and more of the core functionality that you would expect in something like OpenClaw.
They're definitely
So
moving in that direction.
yeah, no doubt about it. And to your point, if I think about things that I could easily run on a cron, like, once a week, I have my project basically doing a scan across 5 or 6 different companies and some of the open source projects just to see what's been released, what's new, is there anything that's going to be relevant to us? Like that's great for a cron job, but a lot of other things don't really need to be that way. They can kind of be ad hoc based on when you need them.
Yeah, like my biggest thing is just every time I do something, I try and do it as a skill first,
Yes.
then rarefy the skill. That way, like I think normally I would probably do something a few times before making a skill, but with the lift from AI, just skill stuff first, run through the skill, see how it performs, iterate it on it a little bit for the task, and then you're just generating a library of behaviors that are like eminently reusable. And then
Yeah.
also, I feel like a thing that a lot of people snooze on, and this is maybe my engineer brain a little bit, don't just like do a skill for a thing. Think about the pieces of the skill that you're going to create skills for the individual pieces, because you'll find that if you can nail like a sub skill really nicely, which is still just a skill, but you can
Yeah.
build skills of skills, and getting really nice composite skills is fantastic.
100%. And then also you can kind of debug too. Like
Yeah.
if you have some of those concerns isolated, like it's just a lot easier. So I'm totally with you. I will tell you, I love your take on this. My
Mhm.
experience in building this, like I would go insane now if someone like made this unavailable because it's been so valuable. But at the same time, 99% of people are not going to do this. Like there will be
Yeah.
some amazing products built in that space that don't require users to do like weekly or daily maintenance. The average person is just not going to want to sit there for an hour or two every weekend going back and then like looking at, so I do a Kaizen sweep every week
Mhm.
where we look at basically a friction log to try to figure out where do we need to make changes. I'm monitoring, like I said, a bunch of those open source projects and other projects to see if there are any ideas I might want to use. The average person doesn't want to do that. That's entirely why products exist.
Right. I mean, most people aren't builders. If more people were builders, we'd probably see a lot more companies out there than we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I'll tell you, I think been the thing, like this particular AI wave has been awesome and I'm having fun building in it. And I think you're having fun building in it.
Absolutely.
But like at the same time, the amount of work that goes into building something that's like a real product that you're going to use day to day versus like what you're going to vibe code on a lovable, like there's a real delta there.
A
And
huge one.
yeah, I feel like the market is starting to wake up to the difference between the two, but it's going a little bit slower than I would have expected because I think it's so easy. It is so easy to like YOLO your way into something that looks like it's going to work in 5 or 6 hours. And then the difference between that and something that you're going to get real value out of every day is months and months of time.
Yeah, I mean, this is like kind of one of the quintessential, I don't know if struggle is the right word, but struggles of like both engineering and product. I feel like execution has been really cheap for a long time. It's cheaper now, obviously, with AI, but relatively speaking, like, velocity is the composition of direction and speed overall. So to that effect, speed has been relatively cheap. You've always been able to, for decades now, hire a team out in a different country for a relatively lower amount of cash and get speed that way, so you can manage them appropriately. Actually, with the news right now, it might still be cheaper to do that than to actually run AI speed wise, which is insane and fascinating. But direction has always been difficult, and taste has always been difficult, and judgment has always been incredibly difficult. In part because just a lot of decisions that you have to make about how things are built, especially the first time you build them, the decision is counterintuitive. And I feel like these tools can do a good job of recommending actions to you, but also it all has to be taken with a significant grain of salt, because the all of these models have significant biases built into them. They really like adding additional code as opposed to removing stuff. So if you're not careful, they'll do a band-aid and then a band-aid on the band-aid and a band-aid on the band-aid and a band-aid, and the stack goes up and up and up. They really prefer local changes to that effect. Getting these agents to do like large sweeping systematic changes is tough. Like you really have to push the agents and plan with the agents and ask them follow-up questions and do like Ralph review loops and gas sound review loops and all of these sorts of things to get it rarefied to a point where it's actually something. I mean, I wouldn't say satisfactory, but something usable for the most part.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'll tell you the thing that's been interesting for me, you're starting to see more companies. I think Uber mentioned this the other day that
Right.
they're waking up to the velocity issue, which is direction actually matters. Like you can ship a lot of things, but if you're shipping the wrong things, that is, the slowest way to build anything is to build the wrong thing.
Exactly.
And that is kind of still the gap in the market today. Do you know the
So
right?
actually, to that point, I would extend that further and make that argument even stronger. If you consider opportunity cost due to like how much additional speed is available now, direction has always mattered. Direction matters more than ever, and making a mistake in direction is more expensive than ever right now because the tools themselves are not cheap. But also, if you consider opportunity cost, if you accelerate like 2 weeks in a given direction, if you're in the right direction, that's 2 weeks of great, incredible forward progress that might be the equivalent of, I don't know, let's say 4 months previously.
Yeah.
Like no accounting for estimates. But now, if you spend 2 weeks in the wrong direction, that's the equivalent of 4 months in the wrong direction, which means that your competitors can go eat your lunch much more aggressively than ever. So you really have to watch direction. You have to watch priorities more than ever. Like if anything, it feels like it's gotten more and more competitive for everyone out there. And additionally, there's like this. I mean, I don't want to call it new, but the surface of the second mover advantage, right? With these tools, if you have something out on the market, if someone can get in and get a demo of your product, they can rebuild.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be as good as your product, but if you have proven traction, that is an attractive target for people to replicate what you got. And it's never been more possible than it now.
I'm with you. I mean, that is a conversation we have a lot is how do you build things that are so clearly and obviously better than number one, anything they can do themselves. Number two, anything they're going to do just with like co-work or something like that, which is a great product. But number three, to your point, because anyone can copy things. And on that point, one of the things that I think is going to be interesting is will we see a world where the calculus around putting your product knowledge base out on the public internet changes again? Because I remember when I started in software, companies weren't doing it because they didn't want competitors to see it. And then it became more valuable to have it available for search because you were getting search traffic. And so they were willing to make the trade off to prioritize growth over competitive intelligence gathering. Now, for the reasons that you've mentioned, if you can point something at it and crawl, you,
Whole knowledge base. I hadn't
yes,
even considered that.
I think the calculus could start to change. It's going to be really interesting to see if that evolution happens.
That's really, really interesting. At least from the topography that I see right now, I would say, yeah, probably. Like, I don't have evidence of that. I would have to go look for evidence of that, but I bet that's happening right now.
Yeah, and there's
Because,
always going to be like back end engineering that's
of
not
course.
obviously available inside of the knowledge base, but there are going to be a lot of things that do matter, right? Like if you've made really sophisticated choices around governance. I mean, governance seems like it's defensible versus foundation models.
Mhm.
You're going to have to articulate that to the customer because the customer needs to understand how the product works. And that would go in something like a KB or, I'm seeing some companies, you're probably seeing this where they're debating between doing away with the customer facing knowledge base and just having like a chat experience or not. But either way, like that's going to get surfaced.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it will persist to a certain extent just due to GEO, because I know the knowledge base is traversable by GEO. And actually, GEO companies that I'm aware of are pushing people more heavily into KV type stuff. But, this is a really interesting counter pressure there. because yeah, it is imminently traversable. That's the point, right? Otherwise, it doesn't work for geo, which means it's an attractive target. And also to your point about back, like back in engineering tasks too, just from observing the product, you can make a lot of inferences about how the backend must be interacting with the product. So it is there is more friction there, but I would definitely caution founders from assuming that just because it's backing your servers, just because you have your IT under source control, that people can't use, signal analysis techniques, basically reverse engineering via considering it as a black box to figure out a lot of what you've got going on in the back end there.
Yeah, and I think that listen, it's always been about, can you deliver value that's unique and hard to copy? Like, that's always
Absolutely.
been important, but the pressure on that today, I think, is greater than it's ever been, because you can copy things in a much easier fashion than you could in the past. You've also got a new set of players that may or may not move into your space when you look at companies like the foundation model companies, the Anthropics, the
Right.
OpenAI. And for a lot of product categories, if you were B2B in the past, that probably might have been a risk if you were doing office related stuff, but not to the degree that it is today. And so I think if you don't have a really precise view on what you're doing that's going to be uniquely valuable and hard to copy, you're just going to be in for a rough ride.
Yeah, actually, I've mentioned this to a few people. Like the typical B2B SaaS playbook as it has existed for a long time now has generally been hit SMB, hit some degree of product market fit, and then swim upstream into enterprise. Enterprise is just a productivity tar pit. So they have spare capacity that they can just build whatever tools they want with AI right now. So it's an interesting landscape that I think right now where a lot of these startups need to scale towards like full product market fit and potential profitability, but do so, I think, potentially exclusively on SMB because enterprise very well may be walled off from them.
Yeah, it could be. That's an interesting take. I mean, I think the thing I'm definitely bought in on is that you are going to have to build something today that's probably more robust to get traction and move than you would have in the past, for exactly the dynamic that you're talking about. Like, the customer, especially the enterprise customer, has to look at this and say, hey, do we take engineering capacity, even though it's more productive today, and do we pull it off the thing that drives revenue for us? Or is this product so expensive but copyable enough? It's worth it for us to have some capacity go to replicating that internally. And if your answer is not, hey, what we're doing is so robust and you're not really going to be able to do this at a price that's going to make sense for you, yeah, you're going to be at risk. You're always going to be at risk of internal build in a way that was not as true if you and I were talking 3 or 4 years ago.
Another interesting angle on that too is compliance and specifically compliance as a mo. Because if you are enterprise and you're vibe coding something, you're almost certainly not going to be building something with compliance. So being able to go to market with GDPR, CCPA compliance early, ISO compliance early, SOC 2 compliance early. Like it's a whole world of like I would never have recommended that to
Yes.
founders in the past. Like I would be like compromise on that. Just go to market, like figure that out when you have to. But honestly, now where we are right now, compliance is, and especially with the growth of compliance, like CCPA is a pretty good example. If you want to get big and do business in California, which almost certainly everybody does want to do, you got to hit that. So if it's going to help you land deals early, also I feel like having worked in compliance stuff pretty frequently, everybody acts like the lift on that is huge, and it's much lower than a lot of people give it credit for. But of course, like caveat, like make sure you're getting signals from your customers that that's the
Yeah.
thing that they care about. Don't just do it to do it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, some of it's segment dependent. I think for us, I completely agree with you, and it's true, right? We're only a few months into this. We're already talking about bring your own key, and
Mhm.
because we know we're going to need it the second we get to businesses of a certain size. And if you know what the things are going to be now, many of those compliance capabilities are easier to add in the beginning than they are to do late.
Significantly. I've seen a difference between some compliance projects being like, oh, yeah, we can do this in like a week or two of work to others be having timelines of years. And if you want to land enterprise deal and it's going to take you over a year to execute on that just because of, compromises on compromises. It's going to be a very painful process to land things in time for that deal. Well, Frank,
That's
I want to be respectful of your time. Do you want to plug Tempo a little bit more?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So we're focused on consulting and software systems implementation firms. And, as I mentioned, the challenge that they're running into today is clients expect more. And as a result, it's putting pressure on them to make sure that they're driving repeat engagements. And the way that you do that is you eliminate risk in the current service delivery. The challenge that they're running into is that the way that they've done that in the past just doesn't scale today. Like the assumption prior to this was you would buy project management tools or PSA tools and that people would update those tools and that would give you visibility. Like we've all worked in enough businesses to know that people don't like doing admin work. And so those tools just don't get updated. And what that leads to is a bunch of expensive humans trying to reassemble the picture of the world every week. And typically, because they're humans, spotting risk early is tough when it's scattered across a bunch of tough digital touch points. So we plug into all of your digital tools, watch the exhaust, assemble the state of the world, and flag the risk early. So your team is focused on judgment, risk, and advisory and not doing admin work just to know what's going on with each project you're working on.
Well, Frank, thank you so much for joining us. This has been fantastic. This was everything that I wanted from this chat and more. And for everybody watching, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you feel as inspired as I do to get out and build agent related things. Frank has been an inspiration for me in terms of working on my own content library and also an inspiration in some of my hacking on Pi. So I hope you take that same fire that's been lit inside of me and take it out into the world and build some cool stuff and share it with everybody.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. This was awesome.
Catch you around, Frank. Peace.
See ya.